the sea, somewhere waiting for me.
Alright, we are on lesson number 4, and we're still in the fraction chapter, in the fraction unit. So far we've learned just about fractions, about mixed numbers, and then we learned how to compare and order fractions. So now before we move on in the second half of this unit to adding and subtracting fractions, we're going to take a look at how to relate fractions and decimals. Because I think this is an important thing to recognize and to learn before we move into that next piece. Before we move into adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing fractions, I think it's important for us to relate how does this relate to where we've been before we move on to something new. So relating fractions and decimals, it's a pretty simple concept, so I don't think this should be a long lesson for us to go through at all. What we want to do is you just want to keep in mind one thing, and this is something that I've seen a lot of people kind of make mistakes with throughout my time as a teacher, is that the fraction bar is nothing more than a representation of division. When you see 3/4, that really means nothing more than 3 divided by 4. So when we look at this problem, really this just means we're taking 3 and we're dividing it by 4. Now some of you may already know what this represents as a decimal, and that's great. There are some of these that I hope you're going to memorize throughout this chapter. 3/4, 1/2, 1/4. You know, some of the basic ones we're going to memorize eventually. So here we have 3/4. So what that means is I have 3 divided by 4. So remember, when we divided numbers that couldn't go into it, we had to add the decimal point, add a 0, and bring our decimal point up. So that 4 goes into 30 7 times. It's 28. Subtract. We have remainders, so we continue to add zeros. Remember, we don't deal with remainders anymore. Continue to add those zeros. 4 goes in there 5 times. Now we get the remainder of 0. So 3/4 is equal to 0.75. Fractions and decimals relate the exact same information. Eventually we'll get to a point where we're talking about why fractions can be more useful or why decimals can be more useful. For today, I just want us to kind of go back and forth between some fractions and some decimals. So this is just an example of what we're going to be looking at. So let's do a couple of these. We'll take a look at a couple more fraction to decimal examples, and then we'll go the other way. So just looking at a couple more here. If we had, let's say, so we can call this example number 1. Let's say we had 2/5. Again, what this means is we're really taking 2 divided by 5. So I put 2 on the inside of a box, divided by 5. It doesn't go in there at all, so I add the decimal point and a 0. Remember to bring your decimal point straight up. 5 goes into 20 4 times. I multiply and subtract. That gets me a remainder of 0. So 2/5 is just 0.4. And it's as simple as that. So, because I think you guys are probably catching on to this pretty quickly, let me give you a couple. So let's see if we have 5/6. Let's say we have 1/8. And if we have 4/5. So go ahead and figure out each of those. And I will tell you, sometimes we're going to get to ones where the decimal is going to go on for a long time. If that occurs, you can always stop at 3 decimal places. So that's kind of a rule that we've had throughout the year. You can always stop at 3 decimal places if it goes on for too long, so that way you're not spending too much time dividing it out. So remember, we've dealt with that repeat symbol before. So what happens is whenever you have a repeating decimal like that, and you can see that you're going to get the same thing again and again and again, we can use that repeating bar to stop that. And that way you just know it's going to keep repeating. So 5/6 is equal to 0.83 repeating, 1/8 is equal to 0.125, and 4/5 is equal to 0.8. Now to go the other direction, we just focus on place value. So for instance, if I had 0.12, okay? So 12 1/100ths. When we say that, notice we say 12 1/100ths. So what that means is we're going to take 12 and just put it over 100. Whatever place value it ends with, that's the number that goes in the denominator. Now I can simplify, so we can divide these both by 2. Actually, we can divide them both by 4. And so we get 3 out of 25. And so 12 100ths as a fraction is 3 out of 25. So if we do that again, if I were to have, let's say, 0.525, notice it ends, that's 525 thousandths. So when we write that, we'd have 525 over 1,000. We can divide these both by 25, actually. So it's 21 over 40 is how that simplifies down. And so that direction with it is a little more exact to what we've been doing. But again, let me give you a few examples to do on your own so that you can see that you're understanding it, and then we'll do some more with this in class. So go ahead and change each of those into their corresponding fractions. I'll give you a minute or two to do that, and I'll give you the answers. Alright, so there are your answers. So go ahead and check yourself versus those and make sure that you have the right ones. And we will talk about this a little more in depth tomorrow.